How can people use hunger as a weapon in war?
So starvation has been defined as the cheapest weapon of mass destruction that is available to armies and militaries. It is very cheap and it is easy to kick off. You know, when you are in a conflict setting, even a momentary burst of violence interrupts livelihood activities if it is precisely and directly targeted. For example, if I launch an attack at a very critical time in the agricultural season, even a short burst of conflict, even for 1 week, can have long-lasting consequences of even up to 18 months. If planting is interrupted, if harvesting is interrupted, and for farmers who depend on livestock, if they cannot move their livestock to pasture, if they cannot find enough water sources for their livestock, it can have serious repercussions on their food security. And often in cases of war, we are seeing that militaries, armies, and people in charge often target civilians at critical times in the farming season. So that way, starvation is being used as a weapon of war. You are deliberately starving people. You are deliberately using hunger to recruit people. So when you look at it, that starvation is being used as a tactic of war. What is interesting about it is that the United Nations Security Council, though, in 2018, it passed a resolution 217 that prohibits the use of starvation as a weapon of war. It actually makes it a war crime for people to use starvation during conflict as a weapon.
Do the workers in the World Food Programme ever put themselves in dangerous settings?
So aid workers have continued to be on the front lines of both hunger and conflict. They are at the front lines even of disease and insecurity. We had COVID-19 hit the world, and aid workers stayed in countries where they were even at risk of the disease. So dangerous settings are not only when you have fighting. You can be at risk of disease. You can be at risk of many other things. They are risky locations. And 2020 has been characterized in the development world by violence that systematically targets aid workers. Some of the countries where it's dangerous to be an aid worker include South Sudan, Yemen, Afghanistan, Somalia, Iraq, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Central African Republic. And these are all countries where WFP has very big operations and a very pronounced presence. So yes, WFP staff are often on the front lines of both hunger and conflict, and by extension, are faced by very dangerous situations from time to time.
Have you ever put yourself in one of these dangerous settings?
So I lived and worked in South Sudan for close to 3 years. South Sudan is one of the most dangerous countries to be an aid worker. Whilst there, I was in some very risky locations. There is a lot of ammunition in the hands of civilians. There are a lot of firearms all over, let alone with the military and militia. I was heading WFP's communication unit in South Sudan, based in Juba, and would often travel with cameras. The amount of paperwork that you have to do to clear yourself to be able to be in possession of a camera and even to be able to move around with that camera within the country is unbelievable. I often told my family and friends that it was easy to carry a gun in South Sudan than it is to carry a camera.
What impressions does it give you to see how bad circumstances people live under?
I am in awe at the strength and resilience of people I have met in my travels and during my time working with the World Food Program. I started my career in Zimbabwe. I've also been fortunate enough to work in Mozambique. I was based in Mauritania. I've also worked in South Sudan. I've worked in Italy, and now I'm based in Geneva. The people you meet under very difficult circumstances, but they still have a reason to believe that things can be better. I was in South Sudan when we had one of the most devastating floods. People were saying they had not seen so much rain, so much storms in 40 years. Whole towns were submerged by water. People had lost everything from livestock. People had even lost their loved ones. And I met an old man, and then I asked him, I'm from the World Food Program, right? And the moment he sees you, I ask him, what are you going to do now? Instead of asking for food, he said, you know what? I've lost everything. I've lost my wife. I've lost my livestock. I've lost the crops that were just about to be harvested in the field. But I tell you what, I will recover most of the things that I have lost. The crops, the livestock, my livelihood, I will recover only if there is peace. So it is the strength of people under very difficult circumstances that stays with me and will forever stick out in my mind.
How does that affect you as a person?
Well, it galvanizes me to fight on. It gives me a lot of reason to wake up every day and continue with the fight against hunger. It strengthens me, it emboldens me that despite the challenges that we face as a world, despite the seemingly insurmountable task that is before us, 690 million people go to bed hungry. It's possible to eliminate hunger in our lifetime. It gives me that strength, that renewed vigor, that renewed sense of hope that we will get there someday.
How has the coronavirus affected your work of your organization?
So COVID-19 is threatening to double the needs in most countries. We are estimating that the fallout from the coronavirus on world economies is going to be even more deadly than the disease itself. We are very happy that we have now seen the first vaccines being administered to people in most countries, but it's going to take a while before economies recover. Sadly, it's going to be. It's likely to be even worse before it gets better. Lockdowns, restrictions that were imposed by the world to contain and stop the spread of the virus have resulted in new needs coming up. We have people that we never used to assist who now need our help. Migrant workers who had left countries where they were working have now become a new group of people that may need our areas. Those people that survived on $1 a day in some countries who are unable to get those jobs again have now fallen into the poverty trap and who need assistance. People who have been living with with terminal conditions such as HIV and AIDS and other conditions whom we have been supporting in some countries will need even more support now. And countries that were also helping us are now starting to feel the pinch because they are faced with domestic pressures in their own backyards. But we continue to appeal to them to dig deeper and assist us so that we assist those that are most vulnerable in some very difficult contexts to pull through. COVID is is an added pressure. Hunger needs we have been growing in the past 4 or 5 years. And with COVID, we anticipate that 2021 and going forward, more needs will arise.
The number 2 goal in the UN Sustainable Development Goals is to exterminate hunger. Do you think the Nobel Peace Prize will help to achieve this goal?
Absolutely. But before I get into that, let me just give you a few numbers, a few facts and figures to jog your mind. Of the nearly 700 million people who are hungry in the world, about 60% of them live in countries that are affected by conflict. Some 77 million people that need food assistance in the world, more than half of the 135 million people that are facing acute hunger, 77 million, they are located in 22 countries that are in conflict. In 8 out of the 10 of the world's main food crises, conflict and insecurity are among the key drivers. About 2/3 of WFP's assistance, all that life-saving assistance that we do in the world, it goes to people, most of that goes to people who are facing food crisis caused by conflict. Now, the 3 worst food crises in the world, as I speak to you now, in Afghanistan, Democratic Republic of the Congo, and Yemen, they are all conflict countries. Now, what you see from this is that these are all man-made crises. Therefore, they are man-made solutions. End the conflict, and we will end hunger. And the Nobel Peace Prize, because it highlights the connection between hunger and conflict, is one of the best opportunities that we could have ever dreamed of to help us drive the world towards hunger, towards a world that is free of hunger in the future.
How would you describe the World Food Programme's work in 3 words?
We feed people.